Welcome everyone to another episode of Life Stories Unscripted podcast. I'm your host Viviane, and I'm a mama coach, doula, and a breastfeeding specialist, and I talk about everything related to preconception, pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and beyond. So if you're a parent or you're trying to be one, this is the podcast for you, so stay tuned. Today I'm talking to Christine Marie from Great Britain, who is a mindfulness and holistic coach and helps parents with children who are stressed and anxious. If you like this podcast and you've seen some of my previous episodes, please hit the subscribe button so you and me can spread the word on awareness together. Last but not least, this video is sponsored by Perfecta Placenta, located in Beverly Hills, which is a placenta preserving company. So if you would like your miracle organ to be preserved, get a diaper bag and a stretch marker as a gift, please use my promotion code Doula Viviane. And for more information, I can be reached via LinkedIn or Facebook under my own name, which is Viviane Schima, or via my Gmail address, which is birthwithviviane@gmail.com. I'll be excited to hear from you. Without any further ado, let's talk to Christine. Enjoy. Hi, Christine. Thank you for being here today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Viviane. It's lovely to be here.
So I talked about you a little bit in the intro, that what you do, but please tell us a little bit what led you to become a holistic and mindfulness coach and trainer.
Okay, so I actually have two children, and my eldest is very severely celiac. He can't tolerate gluten, but we went through a whole load of things and a year of thinking, oh my goodness, what's wrong with him, before we eventually got diagnosed. And even after that, it got worse and worse. His health, the foods he could eat, it was reducing and reducing. And in the middle of all this, we were in Canada at the time, where both my boys were born. We moved back to the UK to take care of my mother-in-law, and it just got worse and worse, and we kept going to see down the traditional medical route, which, you know, really good for some things, but in this case, you know, I kept saying there's more allergies, there's more, no, that's not a sign of allergy. Eventually, just by a pure chance meeting in a park, I met a lady who told me about something, a lady who lived actually just a few minutes away from us, that actually might have been able to help. So we went along to see her, and she had a vegan machine, which I don't know if you have heard of, but you basically grab an electrode type thing and a food in the other, and it can tell what your body can't tolerate or is allergic to.
Wow.
So she tested him for loads of things, and he came off certain foods for a while, and then we reintroduced them, because quite often after a 3-month gap, you can reintroduce foods. But we just kept going around in circles. So we'd reintroduce them, he was fine, then he would become intolerant again. And then she put me onto another lady who was quite a way away, and she said, I don't know how you feel about this, but one of my sons went to see this lady, and it's called natural allergy elimination technique. So we went down there. She's actually a homeopath as well. And so this worked really well for my son. And he got back to eating more foods, and he still cannot eat wheat type products, the glutinous stuff, but he's got a much very bigger varied diet now, and he just eats certain food groups twice a day. So it sort of limits it, but it's still sort of manageable in that way. So that's fabulous. But this lady, I just picked up a leaflet in her reception, and I didn't even realise at the time it was her, and I booked onto a course. I don't know what even made me do it, for emotional freedom technique. So I did that and was really fired up by it. I haven't used headache tablets or anything for pain ever since I trained in EFT. It's amazing modality. So that's that's how I sort of, and then I thought, well, I can do this around my children. I can, have an appointments-based business. And previous to that, I had become a Reiki practitioner years before, but never used it in a professional capacity. So that's basically how I ended up going down that road.
Could you tell us what EFT means?
Oh, sorry. Yes, EFT is emotional freedom technique, and it's basically at a very basic level a modality where you tap on your body, on different parts of your body, and that really reduces your stress and anxiety. But it can be used for pain, for emotions, for basically all sorts of things. You might have even seen some sports people using it in there before they go on to the field or before they participate in their sport. You might see them tapping their hands. So it can really help you with basically stress and anxiety and help you to perform better as well.
Wonderful. Thank you for explaining that.
It's okay.
Thank you.
Sometimes you get so caught up in what you don't
right.
You don't always go back to the basics for people who have no understanding.
All right. I mean, sometimes, that's why we jump in. That's why we discuss. So thank you. So you were saying that you learned how to do EFT with yourself and your kids, and what happened then?
So I learned it for myself and my kids, and then I qualified as a practitioner and decided, that I would start up my holistic business. I made the mistake initially of thinking, oh yeah, I was so carried away, I was so into that people would just come when I'd set my business up, but you have to work on yourself too.
Right.
And that's what I felt. So I started out being quite a generalist in what I took on, and I still see people with all sorts of issues, from weight issues to just generalized anxiety. But then I started to really think about, when I had my children, what was missing for me, because obviously I can identify with parents and their challenges with their children. So when my child had all these issues with food, and my younger one had some issues as well when he was younger, another health problem, and then they went through various things like being bullied at school, and I just didn't have those tools to help them myself. And okay, I can take them along to see somebody, but that's not necessarily what a stressed or anxious child wants. It's not necessarily the right way to approach it, I felt. But I also felt, as a parent, what have I done wrong? I felt guilty. I was like, you start stressing, which then affects the children as well. So I thought about this for quite a long time, and I've come up with an approach that I much prefer to work this way, is that with the parents, if I work with the parents and help them to come to terms with what's going on, etc. as well, but giving them the tools, the strategies, the techniques to actually help themselves, and also to teach that to their own children, I think that's a much more effective way to do it. And of course, like if you've got older children or teenagers, they don't always want to talk to parents. So I will work with children, but it's more of a family-centered approach where it's looking at the right way forward for the whole family. So it might just be the mother that comes to me and I work with them, or it might be the mother and the father, and I might work with them together or separately initially, and then they're then implementing things with their child, but they have a much better understanding of how they're feeling about things as well.
Absolutely. I appreciate what you said, the word family centered and the family approach, because I see it a lot that fathers are oftentimes excluded, especially after birth and even during. Um, they themselves can feel useless, but in fact they're absolutely crucial. They're crucial to the birthing partner. They can be a tremendous support anchor, but also after birth, right? The postpartum period and raising the child together, not just providing for the family, which is usually how it is, but also being emotionally available to the mother, to the children. So I think this is very important, that you not only work with the problem itself, but you include everyone that's surrounded by that problem, even if it
Yeah,
doesn't affect them personally.
yeah, because even if you just think about your child has some issue, it can create so much tension in the house, and it's not just it can then affect the relationship between the couple, between the couple and other siblings, between the siblings who start to resent the other child because they're getting the all the attention, for example, because there is an issue, and that's what we tend to do, then divert the resources. But it's trying to include everybody in that to help them understand as well. So sometimes I do end up working with siblings too.
So Christine, tell us about, you said that you have two children yourself.
Mhm.
Um, so would you like to share a little bit about your birth story and
Sure,
how did it all
sure.
start?
So both my children were actually born in Canada. We lived in Nova Scotia in a very tiny place called First South, and the local hospital was about 20 minutes away. And generally, the care there and everything was really good. But I had pregnancies that were fine, apart from I was diabetic during my pregnancies, but that was all handled, was absolutely fine. But when I went to the hospital to give birth with my eldest, again, it was very, very quick, an hour and a half in labour, which was
Wow.
well, it was 3 hours actually. The first one, my second one was an hour and a half. So 3 hours from the first pain to my eldest being born. But after I'd given birth, the placenta didn't come away properly, and throughout the labour, I'd only had gas and air, and I really didn't want to have any drugs if at all possible. I didn't want to be put under for or numbed for a cesarean or anything else. So, but then instead of including me in the conversation, the doctor was talking to my husband. And because of what was going on, I couldn't hold my son as soon as he was born. So my husband was holding him, but they were talking about me. The doctor didn't say, you know, he might have had to get the consent from my husband because I wasn't in that good a state, but equally I wasn't included in any of that decision making, and all I could do was hear them talking, oh, if this doesn't work, we're going to have to anaesthetize her, put her under, and it was really quite scary because I felt very isolated because I wasn't part of what was going on.
And especially if you can hear it, being like hearing that someone is talking about you without you, but you're in the room, you can clearly hear them. It can be very disempowering, especially, like yes, you're in a different state of mind, and you're going through an immense change, but that doesn't mean you are not, able to understand or situation.
Yeah, and I think even if it had been the case that they came to the bedside and said, "No, this is what's going on," and we're both involved in or even my husband speaks for me almost. That's sort of including you more.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also, you know, a lot of times people say, oh, it's a life-changing experience for the father being there for the birth, and I know certainly from my husband, he was said, you know, I was just so worried that you were going to be okay and the baby was going to be okay, because I think sometimes some things are just glossed over. You know, there can be complications, there can be different things that go on, and it's not like you want to dwell on those, but it's almost being prepared in a way for that as well.
Absolutely. But I agree with that, what you're saying, but I also think that when you said that some things are being glossed over and that your husband was worried rather than, joyous, and that it was a life-changing event for him, because I think that doctors make it rather a medical procedure. They take this medical approach to things, like it's life and death. you know it does not help anyone.
No.
Birth should be wonderful, beautiful. It should be a joyous moment, even if there are some complications. If you're prepared and if you have the information beforehand, there's always a way how to make everyone happy, how you can stay empowered, you can stay in control over your own body, and the doctor is there to help you do that. He's not against you. But I'm hearing that a lot of the times it's not this, unfortunately.
Yeah, and then actually something came to my mind this morning about birth of my second child. So um, again, I think it's really important to acknowledge that, you know, if you've already got a child, it's completely different experience, because, you know, the first time my husband stayed with me the whole time, when I was taken into hospital, all the time I was there, they allowed him to stay. I was in a private room and there was a pull-out bed. The second time, obviously, we had a child. Now, we had fabulous neighbours who did take care of him during the birth, but he couldn't stay and be there with me. And I was really fortunate because it was a very small hospital and they weren't busy at the time. So they came to me after the birth and said, oh, well, there was no complications this time. Everything's great. Do you want to go home? And that was the same day I'd given birth. And I was like, oh, no, I don't want to go home. I've got a toddler. I knew he was well taken care of, obviously, with my husband. And I just felt I needed that time to bond with the second child. But actually, I also had some problems breastfeeding with my second child because the milk didn't come in as quickly, probably, you know, possibly around the stress and everything else. And he had some issues with constipation as well. So we were back in hospital actually within about 2 weeks. But amazingly, and I've heard terrible, you know, stories about women who tried to breastfeed and the hospital not being supportive, but they were wonderful. They showed me how to pump milk. They suggested using milk thistle as well to bring something natural, not immediately putting me onto drugs and things like that. So, you know, overall my experience was amazing compared to lots of people. But I think it needs to include everybody in decisions made around that. And, you know, I would have loved for it to be different, to have a doula, to have a midwife. But at the point my eldest was born, they just would not, in Nova Scotia, they weren't allowed into the hospital to support the mother, unfortunately.
That is really sad. Midwives and doulas can be really life-changing when it comes to birth. They help you be better advocates for yourself, and they help you go from disempowerment to empowerment. and tell you, do you remember what we talked about? Do you still want to proceed with that decision? If yes, then that's great, but you can say no at any given time, and they are
Absolutely.
expected. But that's the thing, a lot of people, doulas are still considered a luxury, which they shouldn't really. And a lot of people also don't know that a doula exists, like that is an actual job or an actual thing. um, but what you said, that doctors, I'm not saying all of them, there are a lot of doctors who are
There are a
absolutely
lot.
wonderful, but we hear stories, right? We hear experiences. And my experience is, what I've been told by mothers is that they often felt cornered, by the doctors. They felt scared, like they can't say anything, and it wasn't really a discussion, it was just an announcement: this is what I'm going to do.
Although actually something's just come up in my mind. So I said when I was having problems breastfeeding, and actually most people were absolutely wonderful. But it was actually a female doctor said to me, "Do you even know how to breastfeed?" And you could see the look on the nurse's face was like, "That's just horrific."
Right.
And you don't know what day they've had, to be honest, what's been going on, but
Right.
I was very shocked that a female doctor said that to me, because I'd had lots of really great male doctors as well during my lead up to giving birth at the clinic that I went to. Yeah, so it was a bit interesting, and bizarrely, her husband specialised in pregnant women, birth and breastfeeding, because they were both doctors. But that was a bit of a shock, really.
It's shocking. It's shocking to me. I mean, I'm astonished by this.
I didn't let it
And we
pass. I was a bit more confident by then because it was my second child, but
right.
even so, you sort of think that for a young mum, and I was much older actually when I had my children, so I was probably better equipped. I was 43 and 45 when I had them, so I was probably better equipped to stand up to people, or
Mhm.
put my point of view across. But I think it's very sad that it's not a great experience for many people, because they feel pressured into doing.
Absolutely. And it's a very vulnerable time. And, you know, one little a little praise can go such a long way, just as a criticism, you know.
Mhm.
It just depends which way we decide to go.
And I think, as I say, I was diabetic in both my pregnancies, and the clinics there were fabulous, and they kept saying to me, "I don't know how, you're so good, you control your blood sugars really, really well." Um, and that was really nice to know that I was doing that. But also, you're then thinking, but that's going to affect my baby, so I have to.
Right.
You've got a responsibility. And then it brings to mind, do they really explain the dangers? Because I'm always one to look into something. Do they really explain how important it is to control that sort of thing in pregnancy? Or do people just think, "Oh, I know that diabetes is curable, or not curable, but I can take insulin, I can do this," but it's all those effects that they. And I'm not saying that you never do those things, but it's just being mindful of the fact that there are
Absolutely.
consequences to doing things.
Yeah. But you also said, the one thing you said that resonated with me was, do they really explain the dangers? It's, a lot of times we get diagnosed with something, and we just get the treatment, we just get the cure of sorts, but we're not explained what is happening, why this is so important, what we should do. Here are some resources if
Mhm.
you're interested, for if you want to further educate yourself. And I think this disconnects us from the actual problem that we're having, because we're just giving this magical pill or this magical recipe to do twice, a day, and we don't think about it. And then when we forget, we don't really feel any repercussions, because we've
No.
explained what's happening and what is it doing to my body and my baby, and what happens if I don't follow this protocol that I've been given. And I think that is a really good point that you mentioned, because it's not just about treating someone, it's also the prevention and the information, right?
And I think it's about looking at the whole person, not just necessarily taking, you know, taking the medication. In some cases you may, you have to do it. There's no other way of treating it, maybe. But for you to understand the whole thing and understand maybe the stress and anxiety effect, how that works in your body, and how to manage your stress and anxiety during your pregnancy and later. So because obviously anything like that, whatever emotions you're feeling as you're pregnant are being transferred down to your baby as well. So I think a lot of times, I in some ways it was nice to be told I was managing it so well, but then I was thinking, oh my goodness, what does everyone else do?
Right.
Does everyone else just keep taking the pills or more pills or whatever and just eat whatever they want, or what
Right.
do they do?
And that's another thing, when you're having a baby, you get very limited to what medications you can take, and even the ones that are considered safe should be, shouldn't go over a certain quantity.
I could I can remember in the last 3 weeks with my second one, I had a terrible cold, and it just wouldn't shift, and I had a cough. And my doctor said to me, it's okay, you can take over-the-counter medicines. Your baby's formed. And I'm like, no, I don't think so.
Right.
I'm not going to. And then once I'd given birth, actually they gave me some stuff to just like one of those masks that to just clear everything, because I was in such a bad state. And I actually slept on a recliner, so I was more upright for the first few weeks after my baby was born. He was just next to me in a travel cot, but it was just
So you
because
wouldn't
I was.
congested.
It was like, sorry.
So you wouldn't feel as congested, right?
Yeah, so I wouldn't feel as congested because I really didn't want to take anything,
Right.
because then I was breastfeeding.
Right.
So it's yeah, I think it's all down to personal choice, obviously, but I think sometimes people are told something and they feel, like you say, pressured into doing it, whether it is, do I really need to take this medication, or as much of it, is there something I can do to handle it in a more natural way, is something I would always ask now. But I've always tended to be that way, but I think once you start to go down that route and you realize some things can be very harmful.
Right.
I'm not saying there's natural things for absolutely everything. Obviously, sometimes you have to take medications, and it's like people say to me, oh, can I come off this? I'm like, oh no, I'm not a doctor. You can't come off medication. I can show you how to manage maybe your illness and stress, but you can't just do that. You have to do that in conjunction with a medical professional.
Right. But it's great that they ask you this, because like you said, you focus on the whole person rather than just the problem or just the one aspect of things, which you're not just taking care of the problem, you're looking at the person's feelings and emotions and what maybe got him to the point where he is now. And for them to acknowledge it and realize maybe I don't need this medication. I feel so much better because of, the emotional freedom technique that you present to them, and just the whole mindfulness approach, to just stop or just pause and think, what can I do to make this better? What
And I think,
can I do?
yeah, and I think also if you think about most diseases that come up for people, and again, not all, but most diseases, when you get to the root of it, is because of some strong emotion, some trauma that's happened to people. And it manifests because they suppress it and don't deal with it. It manifests as a disease. So I don't know if you've ever seen like wild animals when they've experienced something traumatic, like a gazelle being chased by a lion.
Mhm.
When they get to a place of safety, they literally shake all that energy out. They
Right.
don't suppress it all, and then they sort of shake themselves off and get up and walk off.
And I
Whereas as
thought
humans,
that,
we're not encouraged to
yeah,
do anything like that. And, even like you say, some births can be traumatic, but you can still make it a good experience. But it's about dealing and acknowledging and accepting what's happened, and the emotions around that, which isn't, people want to gloss over that sometimes, but it's best to deal with those things at the time. And unfortunately, some people have suppressed things for years, and sometimes that it comes out in illnesses, in disease.
right. No, yes, you're right. Animals have this amazing ability to just shake it off right then, right there. Whereas we humans, we have a much trickier coping mechanism, I would say. We keep busy, we seek out comfort food, we do all sorts of things just so we don't have to revisit that traumatic event, because
But it doesn't have to be revisiting. So again, with emotional freedom technique, you don't have to be re-traumatized. It's about dealing with the emotions it brought up.
right. But
But
that's
that's
why it's so important to know about this, because why I'm saying revisiting, a lot of people don't know what EFT is or how it can be helpful. So, and I know that when we, relive, like we think about something that happened that was traumatic to us, it's our brain does not know the difference. So
exactly, yeah.
to us, it's almost we're living it with the same emotions, with the same physical reactions we had back then, which is only causing more harm than good. So to know how to actually navigate through this EFT is magical.
I think what people do think is, oh gosh, I'm going to have to tell her absolutely everything about this really traumatic thing that happened to me. And that's not even true, because you can work with clients, and I have worked with clients where they've said, oh, this thing happened and I don't really want to talk about it, but can we work on it? So then you're just focusing purely on the feelings, nothing about what had actually happened, but they can still deal with that. And they don't have to, in the session, they don't have to relive it, because it's about keeping you safe as well. In the training that we do, there's sort of, you're trauma informed, and there's ways of working with that and sneaking up on it almost.
Yeah. And this is beautiful that they know that they're going into your session knowing they don't have to revisit what happened to them and tell it to a person they don't know that well yet. This is very, I would say, this is very freeing for them. This very empowering in itself, that I can get rid of my problem without actually talking about it. I just focus on one part of it.
But
And
some people want to talk about it, and it's entirely client-led. It's not like, don't tell me, I'm just going to do this. But
there's a choice. They have a choice.
Yes, it's their choice, and that's what I think is lacking with a lot of things. People don't have a choice.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And if you don't have a choice, you feel disempowered. So it's a bit like my family-centered thing. Working with the parents, they feel more empowered. But there is always the option, if they choose, that I do something, work with their child as well.
Absolutely.
It's getting the balance and finding what's right for you as well.
And I loved how you said the word choice. And we come back to it in almost every podcast episode, that you have a choice. And that is just the fact, just knowing you have a choice is very empowering to a person, especially one that did not have a choice, or they felt they did not have a choice.
And again, with emotional freedom technique, you don't ever deny what happened.
Right.
So it's not like you erase your memory of it or anything like that. In fact, sometimes it brings up other memories. But it's about dealing with why you feel that way about yourself, situation, your triggers, what things that trigger you often go back to things that, usually before the age of 7, unless you've experienced an extremely traumatic event.
So, Christine, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for being here today and talking about this. I find this very insightful, very enlightening. So thank you. But tell us, where can people find you and reach you?
Okay, so I have a website, which is Christine Michelle with 1L, Murray.com. I also have a Facebook page, which is Complementary Therapies with Christine Michelle Murray, and there's details there as well of other free groups that I have. One's Discovering EFT, Discover Reiki group, and a holistic wellbeing sanctuary, which helps lots of different ways on there to help you manage your stress and anxiety. So they're all free to join, and I'd love to see some of you there if you are interested.
I'm sure that at least one person will reach out. At least one person had an aha moment today. I know I did. And again, thank you. It was such a pleasure talking about this and just bringing more awareness to this topic.
And it's lovely to connect with you because you have very similar views about people having choice and empowering, particularly women, obviously, in what you do, but also like the whole family type approach where, everybody needs to be on the same page and considered, really.
Absolutely. Everybody needs to be heard and listened to. Wonderful. Well, I think this is the takeaway for today. So thank you, Michelle. And I hope, sorry, Christine. Michelle. And just like that, we're again at the end of an amazing episode of Life Stories Unscripted podcast. I hope you like it just as much as I did. If you did, please hit the subscribe button now so you and me can spread the word on awareness together. If you're a mama, a health coach, or a spiritual healer just like Christine is, and you have a story you would like to share with me and the rest of the world, or you know of someone who has a story they'd like to share with me, I can be reached via Facebook or LinkedIn under my own name, which is Viviane Schima, or via my email address, which is birthwithviviane@gmail.com. Don't hesitate to reach out. That is it for me. Thank you everyone for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode. Bye.